Eleanor left me more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I never said a word. I'm Charles Garrison, and my wife left me $75 million. For 18 months after Eleanor died, I watched my son Andrew struggle with bills. His wife Victoria grew more frustrated, more demanding. They asked for help constantly. I said no every time. My neighbors thought I was cruel. My friends thought grief had made me selfish. Victoria posted on social media about my heartlessness. Andrew stopped calling. But I had my reasons for staying silent. Reasons that would save my family. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story might change how you think about family, money, and trust. This is the story of why hiding $75 million from my own son was the most loving thing I ever did for him. Eleanor died on a Tuesday in March. By Friday, Victoria was helping me organize things. Not that I'd asked for help. But Victoria arrived each morning with coffee and sympathy, sorting through Eleanor's belongings while offering gentle commentary about how overwhelming this must be for someone your age. Someone my age. I was 65, not 90. Victoria started small. Casual questions about Eleanor's jewelry while folding her clothes. Innocent observations about our beautiful home and how well Eleanor managed everything. "Charles, you know Andrew and I want to help however we can," she said, holding Eleanor's pearl necklace up to the light. "These decisions can be so difficult when you're grieving alone." I noticed her checking inside jewelry boxes, examining insurance documents on Eleanor's desk, photographing what she thought were important papers when she assumed I wasn't looking. The next week, Victoria showed up to Sunday dinner wearing Eleanor's diamond earrings, the ones Eleanor had received for our 25th anniversary. "Andrew said I could borrow these," Victoria explained when she caught me staring. "Eleanor would want them worn, right? Instead of sitting in a box collecting dust?" Andrew nodded quickly. Too quickly. I said nothing. But I made my first mental note. Victoria had gone through Eleanor's jewelry without asking. The earrings were worth $8,000. I still had Eleanor's insurance appraisal. That evening I found Victoria in Eleanor's study, photographing bank statements on the desk. "Just looking for contact information," she said brightly, "for thank you cards to people who sent flowers." The papers were financial statements, Eleanor's personal account showing routine deposits. Victoria had no business with those documents. "I'll handle the correspondence," I said quietly. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, I just want to help." But her fingers lingered on the bank statements, and I saw her phone screen. She'd already taken 3 photos. That night I locked Eleanor's study. 2 weeks later, Andrew called. His voice was strained, formal. "Dad, Victoria and I were wondering if we could talk to you about something important." They arrived that evening. Victoria wore a new designer handbag, black leather with gold hardware. The price tag was still attached inside the pocket. $3,200. Andrew sat forward on the couch, hands clasped. "Dad, Victoria has this amazing business opportunity. Social media consulting. She's already got 3 clients lined up." "It's about building brand presence for small businesses," Victoria added smoothly. "The profit margins are incredible." I waited. "The thing is," Andrew continued, "we need $12,000 to get started. Just temporary. We'll pay you back in 6 months with interest." I looked at Victoria's handbag, at her new manicure, at the diamond tennis bracelet I didn't recognize. "What kind of business plan do you have?" Victoria and Andrew exchanged glances. "Well, it's more of a flexible consulting model," Victoria said. "The business world moves so fast now. Traditional business plans are kind of outdated." "I'd like to see something in writing," I said. "Financial projections, client contracts, startup costs breakdown." Andrew's face fell. "Dad, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. We're family." Victoria leaned forward. "Charles, Andrew really needs this. He's been so stressed about providing for Timothy and me. Eleanor would want you to help your son succeed." The mention of Eleanor's name in that context made my chest tighten, but I kept my voice level. "Bring me a written business plan and we'll discuss it." Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. We'll get that together." They left 20 minutes later. The business plan never materialized, but the requests for money continued. Victoria launched her public campaign 3 weeks later. I first noticed it on Facebook, a post about young families struggling while older generations hoard wealth. No names mentioned, but the implications were clear. It's heartbreaking when family members prioritize money over relationships, she wrote. Some people forget that love means sacrifice. 17 comments within an hour. Friends asking if everything was okay, offering support, suggesting family counseling. The next post was more direct. Teaching our children that family comes first, even when some relatives have forgotten that lesson. A photo of Timothy looking sad. The caption, when grandparents choose selfishness over grandchildren's futures. My neighbor Helen called that afternoon. Charles, I saw Victoria's posts. Are you and Andrew having problems? I kept my voice neutral. We're working through some family matters. But the post continued. Daily now. Widowers who use grief as an excuse to abandon family responsibilities. Some people think hoarding money makes them powerful. Really, it just makes them lonely. Teaching my son that real men provide for their families, unlike certain examples he's seen. Each post gathered more comments, more concern, more judgment from people who didn't know the full story. I started taking screenshots, timestamps, comment threads. Not sure why yet, but Eleanor had always taught me to document everything. The posts were carefully crafted, never mentioning names, never making direct accusations. But anyone who knew our family could connect the dots. Victoria was painting me as a selfish old man who refused to help his struggling son. The truth was more complicated. Dad, we need to talk. Andrew's voice on the phone was different, distant, like he was reading from a script. Victoria's parents are coming to dinner Sunday. They want to meet you properly. I'd met Janet and Roger Parker twice before, brief encounters at Timothy's birthday parties. Janet sold real estate. Roger worked in insurance. Both seemed pleasant enough, but something about this invitation felt orchestrated. Sunday dinner was at Andrew's house. Victoria had prepared an elaborate meal, roast beef, expensive wine, fresh flowers on the table. Too elaborate for a casual family dinner. Janet and Roger arrived with serious expressions. After pleasantries, Roger leaned forward. Charles, we're all concerned about the family dynamics lately. Victoria's been sharing some of her worries, Janet added, about Timothy's future, about Andrew's career prospects. I waited. We understand grief affects people differently, Roger continued, but sometimes it can cloud judgment, make people overly protective of resources. Victoria sat quietly, hands folded, playing the role of concerned daughter-in-law. Eleanor was such a generous woman, Janet said. She'd want you to help your family during difficult times. The conversation continued for 20 minutes. Careful suggestions about family obligations. Gentle implications about my decision-making since Eleanor passed. I listened, made neutral responses, watched Victoria's face. She thought she was winning. But I noticed other things. Roger checking his phone constantly. A real estate app open on the screen. Property values for my neighborhood. Janet asking casual questions about my retirement planning and long-term care arrangements. They weren't just concerned family members. They were conducting reconnaissance. After they left, Andrew walked me to my car. Dad, I know this is hard, but maybe they have a point. Maybe you could help us out a little. For Timothy's sake. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The stress lines around his eyes, the defensive posture, the way he kept glancing back at the house where Victoria waited. Andrew, has Victoria ever told you about her previous relationships? His face closed off. What does that matter? I'm just curious about her background, her family history. Dad, you're being paranoid. Grief can make people suspicious of everyone. He was quoting someone. Victoria's words in his mouth. That night, I made a decision. It was time to find out exactly who Victoria Parker really was. Underscore, 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 underscore. I found Eleanor's hidden files on a rainy Thursday morning. I was in her study, finally ready to sort through her papers. Behind her desk, I noticed something odd. The filing cabinet didn't sit flush against the wall. When I pulled it forward, I found a manila envelope taped to the back. My name was written on it in Eleanor's careful handwriting. Below that, open only if Victoria pressures for money. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside were 3 items, a key, a note, and a business card for a private investigator named Michael Torres. Eleanor's note was brief. Charles, if you're reading this, my suspicions about Victoria were correct. The key opens the safety deposit box at First National. Box 847. Mr. Torres has additional information. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I hoped I was wrong. Protect our family. Love, Eleanor. The safety deposit box. Eleanor had never mentioned a safety deposit box. I called Mr. Torres immediately. Mr. Garrison, I've been waiting for your call. Your wife hired me 6 months before she passed. She was very thorough in her instructions. What instructions? She wanted Victoria's background investigated. Complete history, financial records, previous relationships. Mrs. Garrison suspected Victoria was targeting your family for financial gain. My chest felt tight. What did you find? I think you should see the evidence in person. Can you meet me at the bank this afternoon? 2 hours later, I stood in the bank vault, key trembling in my hand. Box 847 was larger than I expected. Inside were 3 thick folders, labeled with dates spanning the past year. Your wife was very systematic, Torres said. She documented everything. The first folder contained Victoria's real history. Victoria Marie Ashford, born September 12, 1994, married 3 times in 6 years. First marriage, David Hoffman, 67, widowed contractor from Arizona, married November 2017. David died February 2019 from complications after a fall. Left $1.2 million to Victoria. Second marriage, James Morrison, 71, retired accountant from Nevada, married August 2019. James died December 2020 from pneumonia. Left $890,000 to Victoria. Third marriage, Robert Caldwell, 63, divorced tech executive from California, married June 2021. Robert died March 2022 from heart attack. Left $2.1 million to Victoria. Each file contained marriage certificates, death certificates, and inheritance documentation. Photos of Victoria with each man. Social media posts showing her grief, then rapid recovery. Notice the pattern, Torres said quietly. She targets older men with assets, usually through their adult children or social connections. Brief courtship, quick marriage, then they die, I finished. Within 2 to 4 years, always from medical complications that could be natural causes. The second folder contained financial records, Victoria's spending patterns, luxury purchases immediately after each inheritance, travel to expensive destinations, then gradual asset depletion until she needed another target. She's not just a gold digger, Torres explained. She's systematic, professional. This is how she makes her living. The third folder made my blood freeze. Photos of Victoria at social events, charity galas, church functions, always in conversations with older men, always researching their families, their assets, their vulnerabilities, including photos from our church, from Eleanor's funeral, from community events we'd attended. She'd been watching your family for over a year before approaching Andrew, Torres said. Victoria hadn't met Andrew by chance. She'd hunted him. At the bottom of the box was a sealed letter marked, "For Charles only." Eleanor's final words to me were devastating in their clarity. My dearest Charles, if you're reading this, Victoria has begun pressuring for money. Just as I feared, I hired Torres after noticing her behavior at church functions. She was asking too many questions about our family, our finances, our son's vulnerabilities. The investigation confirmed my worst fears. Victoria is a predator who targets families like ours. She identified Andrew as lonely, insecure, and desperate for female attention after his divorce. She cultivated that relationship specifically to access our wealth. I couldn't tell you while I was alive because I knew you'd confront her directly. That would have pushed Andrew away and made him defensive. Victoria is skilled at playing the victim. Instead, I've prepared everything you need to protect our family legally and financially. The inheritance is already secured in an irrevocable trust with conditions Victoria cannot meet. Mr. Torres has additional evidence if needed. Charles, Andrew is still our son, but he's been manipulated by an expert. Save him if you can, but protect Timothy at all costs. Victoria will escalate her demands quickly once she learns about the inheritance. Document everything. Trust the process. Your greatest strength is that she doesn't know you know. Use that advantage. I love you. Save our family. Eleanor. Attached were pre-drafted legal documents, contact information for estate attorneys, and a detailed strategy for exposing Victoria without endangering Andrew or Timothy. Eleanor had been preparing for war. Now it was time to fight it. Dorothy Sanford had been Eleanor's best friend for 30 years. She was also a retired family court judge with 40 years of experience dealing with financial predators. I called her that evening. "Charles, Eleanor mentioned her concerns about Victoria months ago. She asked me to be available if you ever needed legal guidance." We met the next morning at her home office. Dorothy reviewed Eleanor's evidence with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen these cases before. "This is textbook elder financial abuse," she said, pointing to the social media screenshots. "The isolation tactics, public pressure, family manipulation. Victoria's following a standard playbook. What are my options?" "Several. First, we document everything going forward. Every conversation, every request, every threat. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, so you can legally record conversations without telling Victoria." Dorothy pulled out a thick legal pad. "Second, we modify the trust structure to include additional protective clauses. Eleanor was smart to set it up as irrevocable, but we can add conditions that specifically prevent predatory spouse access." "What kind of conditions?" "Performance requirements based on character rather than compliance. Educational milestones for Timothy. Sobriety requirements. Community service. Things that demonstrate genuine growth rather than manipulation." She continued writing. "Third, we establish a paper trail for potential criminal charges. Elder abuse is a felony in Connecticut. If Victoria threatens you, harasses you, or attempts financial coercion, we have grounds for prosecution." "Will that protect Andrew and Timothy?" "That's the delicate part. We need to give Andrew evidence gradually so he reaches his own conclusions. If we dump everything on him at once, Victoria will convince him we're attacking his family." Dorothy leaned back in her chair. "Eleanor was brilliant to investigate this quietly. Victoria's biggest weakness is that she doesn't know we have evidence. She'll continue escalating, thinking she's in control." "How long do we wait?" "Until she makes a mistake big enough that Andrew can't rationalize it away. Victoria's type always overplays their hand eventually." We spent 2 hours creating a comprehensive strategy: documentation protocols, recording equipment, legal triggers for various escalation levels. "One more thing," Dorothy said as I prepared to leave. "Eleanor left additional instructions with her estate attorney, Jonathan Pierce. You should meet with him this week." Jonathan Pierce's office overlooked downtown Hartford. He'd been Eleanor's attorney for 15 years and had helped structure the trust that would protect Timothy's future. "Your wife anticipated this scenario remarkably well," he said, reviewing the trust documents. "The inheritance is completely protected from spousal claims, even if Andrew divorces Victoria. How much does Andrew know about the trust?" "Nothing specific. Eleanor wanted it that way. As far as Andrew knows, you inherited the house and modest savings. He has no idea about the magnitude of the actual inheritance." Pierce pulled out a thick folder. "Eleanor structured this as a generational trust. Timothy receives educational funding immediately, then graduated access to principal based on character milestones. Andrew receives income only if he meets certain requirements." "What requirements?" "Financial responsibility, stable employment, no gambling or substance abuse. Most importantly, marriage to someone who passes a comprehensive background check." I stared at him. Eleanor knew Victoria would fail that requirement. She suspected. The trust includes provisions for annual background checks on any spouse or significant other. Victoria's criminal history and pattern of inheritance targeting automatically disqualifies her. Pierce continued. "Here's the strategic element. We can reveal the trust's existence without revealing its conditions. Victoria will assume she has access and escalate her demands. Meanwhile, we document her behavior for legal proceedings." "What if she tries to force Andrew to contest the trust?" "She can try. But Eleanor made the trust irrevocable and included specific anti-contest clauses. Any attempt to break it results in complete forfeiture of benefits." Pierce handed me a recording device, small enough to fit in my shirt pocket. "Document every interaction with Victoria, every demand, every threat, every manipulation attempt." "Is this enough to protect Andrew and Timothy?" "Combined with the private investigator's evidence, yes. But Charles, this will get worse before it gets better. Victoria will escalate dramatically once she learns money is involved." As I left Pierce's office, I felt Eleanor's presence strongly. She'd built an unbreakable fortress around our family's future. Now I had to use it wisely. Victoria called 3 days later. Her voice was different, sharper, more demanding. Charles, we need to talk about Eleanor's estate, about your responsibilities to this family. I activated the recording device Pierce had given me. What specifically did you want to discuss, Victoria? Don't play games with me. I know Eleanor left more than you're saying. I've done my research. What research? Property records are public, Charles. This house is worth $400,000. Eleanor's car was new. Her jewelry collection alone is worth $50,000. Where's the rest of it? I kept my voice steady. Eleanor and I lived modestly. What you see is what there is. Victoria's laugh was harsh. Bullshit. Eleanor was saving every penny for decades. Teacher's pension, Social Security, investment accounts. I've seen the bank statements. What bank statements? The ones I photographed while you were making coffee. Eleanor was depositing $8,000 a month from somewhere. That's not pension money. My chest tightened. Victoria had been systematically gathering financial intelligence. Those were her employment benefits, I said carefully. For 6 months after she retired? I don't think so. Victoria's voice turned threatening. Charles, Andrew is your only son. Timothy is your only grandson. Eleanor would want you to help them succeed. What exactly are you asking for? $50,000 to start. Andrew deserves his inheritance now while he can use it. Not after you're dead and the government takes half. The number was specific, calculated. Victoria had been planning this conversation. That's a significant amount of money, Victoria. It's a fraction of what Eleanor really left. Stop being selfish and help your family. The call ended abruptly. But the recording device had captured everything. I spent that evening transcribing Victoria's recorded threats with Dorothy's help. Her language was clearly coercive, demanding money while implying family consequences if I refused. This meets the legal definition of elder financial abuse, Dorothy confirmed. Demanding assets through manipulation and threats qualifies for criminal charges. We prepared a formal cease and desist letter delivered by certified mail the next morning. Mrs. Victoria Garrison, you are hereby notified that your recent communications demanding financial assets constitute harassment under Connecticut general statutes. Your social media posts defaming Mr. Charles Garrison's character represent potential libel. Any further attempts to coerce financial transfers will result in criminal and civil legal action. The letter included timestamps from her social media posts, transcripts from recorded phone calls, and specific legal citations. Victoria called Andrew within an hour of receiving the letter. Your father is threatening to sue me for asking him to help his own family, she told him, loud enough for me to hear when Andrew called me immediately afterward. Dad, what the hell is this legal letter? Victoria's crying. She says you're trying to destroy our marriage. I'm protecting myself from harassment, Andrew. Harassment? She asked you for money. That's what families do. Did she tell you she photographed our bank statements without permission? Did she mention researching property values and demanding specific dollar amounts? Silence. Andrew, Victoria has been systematically gathering financial information about our family. That's not normal family conversation. You're being paranoid, Dad. Victoria loves this family. But I heard uncertainty in his voice, seeds of doubt. Ask Victoria about her previous marriages, Andrew. What? Just ask her, see what she says. The line went quiet for a long moment. Dad, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. After Andrew hung up, I wondered if I'd pushed too hard. But the recording device had captured his conversation with Victoria, evidence that she was manipulating him in real time. Andrew arrived at my house that evening. His hands were shaking. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I waited. Victoria says she was married before. Just once, briefly, to an abusive man in California. She says she escaped and never talks about it because it was traumatic. I reached into Eleanor's filing cabinet and pulled out one document. Victoria's marriage certificate to Robert Caldwell, dated 18 months ago. Andrew stared at the paper. This says March 2022. We got married in September 2022. She was married to Robert when she met you, Andrew. His face went white. That's impossible. She would have told me. I showed him Robert's death certificate, March 15th, 2022, 2 weeks before Victoria started attending our church where she first approached Andrew. She became a widow 14 days before pursuing you. Andrew sat down heavily. There has to be an explanation. There is. But you won't like it. I showed him the inheritance documentation. $2.1 million transferred to Victoria after Robert's death. Andrew, Victoria is wealthy. She doesn't need our help. She's targeting our family for a different reason. What reason? Because she's done this before. Robert was her third husband. All three died within 4 years of marriage. All left her substantial inheritances. Andrew's breathing became shallow. You're saying she's... what? A murderer? I'm saying she's a professional predator who targets vulnerable families for financial gain, and we're her next target. Andrew left without another word, but he took the marriage certificate with him. Victoria escalated within 24 hours. Her first move was using Timothy as leverage. She called me at 11:47 p.m., her voice cold and calculating. Charles, I think it's best if Timothy doesn't visit you for a while. Why? This family conflict is upsetting him. He doesn't need to be around such negativity. I kept my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Timothy is my grandson. You can't prevent me from seeing him. Actually, I can. Andrew agrees with me. Andrew, we think you're becoming unstable since Eleanor died. Paranoid. Making up stories about people. What stories? The lies you told Andrew about my past. Trying to destroy our marriage with fake documents. The marriage certificate was real, Victoria. Prove it. The line went dead. Her second move was public sympathy. By morning, Facebook was flooded with Victoria's posts about elderly family members having mental health crises and protecting children from unstable grandparents. Photos of Timothy looking sad. Captions about difficult decisions to safeguard family. Her church friends rallied around her. Comments offering support for her terrible situation and prayers for Charles's healing. The narrative was simple. Grieving widower becomes paranoid and threatens his daughter-in-law. Family forced to protect innocent child from grandfather's deteriorating mental state. It was brilliant, and completely false. But I was ready for this escalation. Every conversation had been recorded. Every social media post was screenshot with timestamps. Victoria was building her own evidence trail. That afternoon I received a text from Andrew. Dad, maybe you should talk to someone. About the grief. About these accusations. I'm worried about you. Victoria had turned my son against me using the very evidence I'd shown him. Michael Torres called me with urgent information. Mr. Garrison, Victoria's behavior has changed dramatically in the past week. She's been making calls to estate attorneys, researching trust litigation, and contacting social services about elder abuse claims. Social services? She's building a case that you're mentally incompetent. If she can establish that, she might be able to force a competency hearing and potentially gain control over Andrew's inheritance rights. My stomach dropped. Can she do that? It's difficult, but possible, especially if she gets Andrew to support her claims. Torres continued, There's something else. Victoria has been in contact with a man named Stephen Walsh. He's a consultant who specializes in inheritance recovery for wronged family members. What does that mean? He helps people contest wills and trusts by claiming undue influence, mental incompetence, or fraud. His fee is typically 30% of recovered assets. The pieces clicked together. Victoria wasn't just targeting our current assets. She was planning to break Eleanor's trust and claim the entire inheritance. How much time do we have? Not long. Walsh typically files preliminary motions within 30 days of initial consultation. Once that happens, the trust assets could be frozen pending investigation. What's our counter-strategy? We accelerate our timeline. Present Andrew with overwhelming evidence before Victoria can complete her legal maneuvers. And we need to document her contact with Walsh. That proves premeditation and systematic planning. Torres paused. Mr. Garrison, there's one more thing. Victoria has been researching your health records. She's been calling your doctor's office, claiming to be concerned about your mental state. Victoria wasn't just manipulating Andrew anymore. She was building a comprehensive legal strategy to seize control of our family's entire inheritance. The war was escalating rapidly. Andrew showed up at my door at 8 p.m. holding a manila envelope. His face was haggard, eyes red from lack of sleep. Dad, I need to show you something. He pulled out printouts of text messages between Victoria and someone named Stephen. I found these on Victoria's phone yesterday. She's been planning this for weeks. The messages were damning. Stephen, the old man is more paranoid than expected. We may need to expedite the competency angle. How much are we talking about total assets? Significantly more than originally estimated, possibly 8 figures. My fee remains 30% of recovery. Understood. Andrew is cooperating but still has loyalty conflicts. May need to isolate him further from father. Andrew's hands trembled as he showed me more messages. Dad, she's been lying to me about everything. The business opportunity, the money troubles, even her past marriages. What finally convinced you? I called Robert Caldwell's family. His sister told me Victoria was already researching inheritance lawyers before Robert died. She had contingency plans. Andrew sat down heavily. Dad, I think I've been married to a predator, and I brought her into our family. The guilt in his voice was devastating. Andrew, you're a victim too. Victoria is an expert at manipulation. But Timothy, God, Dad, what if she hurts Timothy? She won't, because we're going to stop her. I showed Andrew Eleanor's complete investigation file. 3 hours later, my son understood the full scope of what we were facing, and he was ready to fight back. Dorothy Sanford delivered the legal warning personally on a Monday morning. She arrived at Andrew's house in her official capacity as a former family court judge, carrying formal documentation and accompanied by a court bailiff. Victoria answered the door in yoga clothes, coffee cup in hand, obviously expecting a normal suburban morning. Mrs. Victoria Garrison? Yes. I'm Dorothy Sanford, retired family court judge. I'm here to deliver formal notification regarding potential elder abuse charges. Victoria's coffee cup hit the floor. The formal warning was comprehensive. Documented evidence of financial coercion, harassment through social media, threats involving grandchild access, and systematic attempts to manipulate family relationships for financial gain. Mrs. Garrison, we have recorded conversations, social media evidence, and witness statements supporting felony elder abuse charges. Connecticut. General Statutes, Section 53, 192A carries penalties of up to 5 years imprisonment and forfeiture of any ill-gotten assets. Victoria's composure cracked. This is harassment. I'm being targeted for asking my father-in-law for help. Ma'am, demanding $50,000 while threatening family consequences meets the legal definition of financial coercion. Your social media campaign constitutes elder harassment under state law. Dorothy handed her additional papers. This documentation includes evidence of your previous marriages and inheritance patterns. Similar cases have resulted in federal charges for systematic elder financial abuse. I want to call my lawyer. That's certainly your right. However, I should inform you that Adult Protective Services has opened an active investigation based on this evidence. Victoria's face went white. Adult Protective Services. When elderly individuals are subjected to systematic financial abuse, APS has mandatory investigative protocols. This case meets those criteria. After Dorothy left, Victoria called Andrew at work, screaming about legal attacks and family persecution. But the damage was done. Official authorities were now involved. That evening, I made a calculated decision. It was time to reveal the existence of the inheritance, without disclosing the amount or conditions. Andrew and Victoria came to my house for what Victoria thought would be an apology conversation. Instead, I laid Eleanor's trust documents on the kitchen table. There's something you both need to know about Eleanor's estate. Victoria leaned forward immediately, eyes sharp with interest. Eleanor established an irrevocable trust before she died. It contains provisions for Timothy's education and future security. How much? Victoria asked immediately. The exact amount isn't relevant. What matters are the conditions. I showed them selected pages from the trust documents, enough to confirm money existed, not enough to reveal the full scope. Timothy receives educational funding immediately. College, graduate school, professional training, all covered. Victoria was reading over my shoulder, scanning for numbers. But what about Andrew? What about our family's immediate needs? The trust includes provisions for Andrew, subject to certain requirements. What requirements? Victoria demanded. Financial responsibility, stable employment, marriage to someone who passes comprehensive background screening. Victoria's face changed. Background screening? Annual background checks on any spouse or significant other. The trust includes explicit protections against predatory relationships. That's ridiculous, Victoria said, but her voice was shaking. What defines predatory? I read directly from the trust document. Any spouse with a history of targeting elderly individuals for financial gain, multiple marriages to significantly older partners resulting in inheritance transfers, or patterns of systematic financial manipulation. Victoria stood up abruptly. This is insane. You can't control Andrew's marriage through money. I'm not controlling anything. Eleanor established these conditions to protect Timothy's future. How much money are we talking about? Victoria asked again, more aggressively. Enough to secure Timothy's entire future. College, house, career, startup costs, generational wealth. Victoria's eyes lit up with unconcealed greed. The mask had completely slipped. When does Andrew get access? When he meets the requirements. Victoria cornered Andrew that night. I heard their argument through the recording device Andrew now carried, at his own request. Your father is using money to control our marriage, Victoria said, her voice sharp with fury. Maybe the background check is reasonable. Reasonable? Andrew, he's calling me a predator. He's trying to destroy our family. Victoria, some of the things he found about your past are lies, manipulated evidence designed to turn you against me. Andrew's voice was weary. 3 marriages, Victoria. 3 wealthy men who died and left you money. That's not manipulation. That's documented fact. I was young. I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. Robert died 6 months ago. You married me while you were still processing his life insurance. Long silence. Andrew, I love you. I love Timothy. But I won't stay in a family that treats me like a criminal. What are you saying? I'm saying choose. Me or your father's money. Our marriage or his twisted control games. Victoria, please don't make me. I'm not making you do anything. I'm telling you that if you let your father's paranoia destroy our marriage, I'll take Timothy and leave. You'll lose both of us. You can't take Timothy. Watch me. I'll file for full custody and cite your father's mental instability as grounds. I have documentation of his harassment, his threats, his deteriorating behavior. That's not fair. Fair? Your father hired private investigators to spy on me. He's trying to steal Timothy's inheritance with fake trust documents. They're not fake, Victoria. Prove it. Demand access to the money now. If your father really loves you, he'll release those funds immediately. The ultimatum was clear. Get the money or lose his family. Victoria had played her final card. I arranged the confrontation meeting at Dorothy's law office, neutral ground with witnesses and recording equipment. Professional setting where Victoria couldn't claim harassment or manipulation. Andrew, I'm going to show you and Victoria everything Eleanor discovered. All the evidence. Every document. Victoria arrived dressed professionally, carrying a leather portfolio and acting like she was preparing for a business negotiation rather than facing evidence of her predatory behavior. Charles, I appreciate you finally being willing to discuss this rationally, she said, settling into her chair with practiced confidence. Timothy was staying with Dorothy's daughter for the evening, safe from whatever emotional fallout might occur. Before we begin, Dorothy announced, this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. All parties are being informed of that fact. I placed Eleanor's wedding ring on the conference table, her 1.5-carat solitaire in its original Tiffany setting, the ring she'd worn for 42 years. Eleanor left this for Timothy, I said quietly, along with instructions for protecting him from people who might exploit his inheritance. Victoria's eyes fixed on the ring. It's beautiful. Eleanor had exquisite taste, but she was calculating. I could see her estimating the ring's value, adding it to her mental tally of accessible assets. Victoria, before we discuss the trust, I need to ask you directly. Have you been honest with Andrew about your previous marriages? I've told him everything relevant. Everything? My past relationships aren't anyone's business but mine. Dorothy placed the first folder on the table. Mrs. Garrison, we have comprehensive documentation of your marriage and inheritance history. Would you like to review it before we continue? Victoria's confident facade began to crack. Eleanor recorded a message for Andrew, I said, opening my laptop. She wanted him to hear directly from her about the trust and its purpose. The video filled the screen. Eleanor, sitting in her favorite chair, wearing the blue dress Andrew had bought her for Mother's Day, recorded 3 weeks before she died, when she was still strong enough to speak clearly. Andrew, my dear son, if you're watching this, it means someone is pressuring Charles for money they haven't earned. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I established the trust not to control your life, but to protect Timothy's future. Wealth attracts predators, Andrew. People who see your kindness as weakness, your loyalty as opportunity. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. I hired a private investigator because I noticed concerning behavior from Victoria. Questions about our finances, interest in our assets, research into our family's resources. Andrew's face was pale, but he was listening intently. The investigation revealed a pattern of targeting elderly men through their families. Victoria has done this before, Andrew. Multiple times. This is insane, Victoria muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Eleanor continued, I'm not asking you to choose between family and marriage. I'm asking you to protect your son from someone who sees him as a pathway to wealth rather than a child to love. The video ended with Eleanor holding up the same ring now sitting on the conference table. Guard your heart, Andrew. Guard Timothy's future. The money in the trust will be there when you need it, when you've found someone who loves you for yourself, not for what you can provide. Andrew was crying quietly. Victoria sat frozen, her carefully constructed persona collapsing in real time. I need to see everything, Andrew said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. I opened Michael Torres's complete investigation file. Marriage certificates, death certificates, inheritance documentation, financial records, and surveillance photos spanning Victoria's 6-year career as a professional widow. Andrew studied each document carefully. Victoria sat silently, no longer attempting to explain or defend. Dad, how long have you known about this? Eleanor suspected for months. I've known for certain since 2 weeks after she died. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because Victoria is an expert at manipulation. If I'd confronted you directly, she would have convinced you I was the problem. Andrew picked up a surveillance photo of Victoria meeting with Stephen Walsh, the inheritance recovery consultant. She was planning to break Mom's trust? She was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could control the inheritance through you. Victoria finally spoke. Andrew, your father hired people to spy on me. He's been planning this character assassination for months. Actually, Dorothy interjected, Mrs. Garrison, your late mother-in-law hired the investigator. She suspected you were targeting her family based on your behavior at church and social events. That's impossible. Eleanor liked me. Eleanor documented your questions about the family's finances, your interest in their property, and your research into their assets. She was protecting her family. Andrew looked at Victoria directly for the first time since the video ended. Did you marry me because you thought my family was wealthy? Victoria's silence was her answer. Dad, what do I need to do to protect Timothy? Timothy was 8 years old, but he understood more than adults gave him credit for. When I picked him up from Dorothy's daughter's house, his first question was direct. Grandpa, why is Mommy angry all the time now? We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Eleanor had helped him with homework every Wednesday for 2 years. Timothy's drawings were still on the refrigerator. Stick figures of our family, including Eleanor with angel wings he'd added after she died. Timothy, sometimes adults make mistakes about what's important, I said carefully. Some people think money is the most important thing. Other people think family love is most important. Is Daddy in trouble? Your daddy is learning some difficult things about people he trusted, but he's not in trouble. Timothy pulled one of his drawings from his backpack, a new one showing a house divided in half. On one side, stick figures of him and Andrew looked sad. On the other side, a figure that looked like Victoria was surrounded by dollar signs. I drew this yesterday, he said quietly. Mommy saw it and got really mad. What did she say? She said I shouldn't draw mean pictures about family, but Grandpa, I don't think she really loves us. I think she loves our house and our things. 8 years old. And he'd identified what adults had taken months to recognize. Timothy, your daddy and I are working together to make sure you're safe and happy. That's our job. Will you still be my grandpa even if Mommy goes away? The question broke my heart. Timothy, I will always be your grandfather. Nothing can change that. Not arguments, not lawyers, not anything. He hugged me tightly. Grandma Eleanor told me you would protect me. Before she went to heaven, she said you were the strongest person she knew. Eleanor had prepared Timothy, too, in her gentle way. Your grandmother was right about many things, I said, including how much I love you. That evening I showed Timothy the trust documents, simplified versions Dorothy had prepared that he could understand. College fund, house fund, career startup fund, everything to ensure his future security. This is what your grandmother wanted for you: education, opportunity, and the freedom to choose your own path. Will I be rich? You'll be secure. There's a difference. Jonathan Pierce met with Andrew and me to explain the trust protective mechanisms in detail. The inheritance is structured to prevent exactly what Victoria attempted, Pierce explained, spreading legal documents across his conference table. Eleanor established a generational trust with specific performance requirements. Timothy receives educational funding immediately. Preschool through graduate school, all expenses covered. Andrew studied the numbers carefully. Timothy's education fund alone was worth $1.2 million. At age 25, Timothy receives access to housing assistance, down payment, closing costs, property taxes for the first 5 years. How much? Andrew asked. Up to $800,000 depending on location and market conditions. Pierce continued. At 30, Timothy receives career startup capital, business funding, professional equipment, networking resources, another $2 million. Andrew was doing mental math. That's $4 million just for Timothy. The trust principal continues growing. By the time Timothy reaches 40, he'll have access to the remaining balance for family formation, marriage, children, generational wealth transfer. What about me? Andrew asked quietly. You receive annual income distributions starting immediately, provided you meet the trust requirements. Which are, Pierce read from the legal documents, stable employment, financial responsibility, no gambling or substance abuse issues, and marriage to someone who passes comprehensive background screening. Victoria would never pass that screening, Andrew said. Correct, which means as long as you remain married to Victoria, you receive no distributions. But if I divorce her? The trust recognizes divorce as a qualifying life change. You'd immediately become eligible for income distributions, plus assistance with legal costs and housing transitions. Pierce leaned forward. Andrew, Eleanor designed this trust to reward good decisions and protect against bad ones. Divorcing a predatory spouse qualifies as a good decision. How much are we talking about total? Pierce showed him Eleanor's final asset statement. Andrew's face went white. $75 million, he whispered. Your mother saved and invested for 50 years. She wanted to ensure Timothy's entire family line would be financially secure. Andrew understood now why Victoria had been so determined to access this inheritance. Victoria made her final desperate move on a Thursday morning. She appeared at my door with 2 police officers, claiming I was suffering from elder mental health crisis and hoarding money that belonged to Timothy. Officers, my father-in-law has been acting increasingly paranoid since his wife died, Victoria explained, her voice perfectly modulated for sympathy. He's hiding financial assets, making accusations about my character, and refusing to provide for his grandson's basic needs. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. The older one had seen these family financial disputes before. Sir, we're here for a wellness check, the senior officer explained. Mrs. Garrison is concerned about your mental state and your family's financial situation. I invited them in, offering coffee and seats in the living room. Officers, I'd be happy to address Mrs. Garrison's concerns. But first, I should mention that this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. Victoria's confidence faltered slightly. Mrs. Garrison claims you've been withholding money that belongs to your grandson, the officer continued. That's correct. I've been protecting Timothy's inheritance from someone who plans to steal it. I handed the officer Dorothy's legal summary, 5 pages documenting Victoria's pattern of targeting elderly men for inheritance fraud. Ma'am, you didn't mention your subject has legal representation and documented evidence supporting his position, the senior officer said to Victoria. That's fabricated evidence designed to... Ma'am, these are official court records from 3 different states. Marriage certificates, death certificates, inheritance transfers. Are you claiming these documents are falsified? Victoria's scheme was collapsing in real time. Dorothy arrived within 20 minutes, carrying 3 bankers' boxes of evidence and accompanied by Michael Torres, the private investigator. Officers, I'm Dorothy Sanford, retired family court judge. Mr. Garrison is my client in an ongoing elder abuse case. She methodically presented Victoria's complete criminal pattern. 3 marriages to wealthy older men in 6 years, each marriage lasting 2 to 4 years, each ending with the husband's death and substantial inheritance transfer to Mrs. Garrison. The officers reviewed marriage certificates, death certificates, and bank records, showing $4.2 million in inherited assets. Mrs. Garrison targeted Mr. Garrison's family after researching their financial status, Torres added. We have documentation of her surveillance activities, financial background checks, and consultations with inheritance recovery specialists. Victoria's face was pale, but she tried one final manipulation. These people are persecuting me because I asked for help supporting my son. This is religious discrimination against a young mother. Ma'am, the senior officer said firmly, systematic targeting of elderly individuals for financial gain is elder abuse under Connecticut law. The evidence suggests a clear pattern of predatory behavior. Dorothy handed the officers additional documentation. We also have recorded conversations where Mrs. Garrison threatened to prevent Mr. Garrison from seeing his grandson unless he provided $50,000. That's extortion, the younger officer noted. Combined with the pattern evidence, yes, Dorothy confirmed. Victoria realized her legal position was hopeless. I want to leave, now. Ma'am, we need to complete our investigation. You initiated this wellness check? The officers spent another hour reviewing evidence. Their conclusion was clear. Charles was competent, protected by legal counsel, and justified in his concerns about Victoria's intentions. Andrew arrived as the police were finishing their investigation. He'd been waiting in his car outside, finally ready to choose between his wife and his family. Officers, I'm Andrew Garrison. Victoria is my wife. Sir, we're investigating allegations of elder abuse against your father. The allegations are true, Andrew said quietly. My wife has been threatening my father, demanding money, and manipulating our family for financial gain. Victoria stared at him in shock. Andrew, you can't... I've seen the evidence, Victoria. All of it. Your previous marriages, your inheritance patterns, your plans to break my mother's trust. Andrew pulled out his phone, showing the officers text messages between Victoria and Stephen Walsh, the inheritance recovery consultant. She's been planning to have my father declared mentally incompetent so she could control my family's inheritance. Andrew, please, Victoria pleaded. Think about Timothy. Think about our family. I am thinking about Timothy. That's why I'm choosing to protect him from you. Andrew's voice was steady, resolved. Officers, I want to file charges against my wife for elder abuse, extortion, and attempted financial fraud. Sir, are you certain? These are serious criminal charges. I'm certain. My father has been protecting our family from a predator. I should have listened to him sooner. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. You'll regret this, Andrew. All of you. I know people. I have resources. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Dorothy interjected. Mrs. Garrison, you're now subject to a restraining order preventing contact with any member of the Garrison family. The police investigation triggered a cascade of additional consequences for Victoria. Within 24 hours, Adult Protective Services contacted other elderly men Victoria had been researching online. 3 families came forward with similar experiences: financial probing, manipulation attempts, and suspicious relationship targeting. Connecticut State Police opened a formal elder abuse investigation spanning multiple counties. Victoria's social media accounts, which she'd used to publicly pressure me, became evidence of systematic harassment. Her posts about selfish widowers and family obligations established a clear pattern of emotional manipulation. The inheritance recovery consultant, Stephen Walsh, distanced himself immediately once police involvement became apparent. His business model relied on civil disputes, not criminal elder abuse cases. Most damaging to Victoria was her own recorded conversations. Her demands for specific dollar amounts, her threats involving Timothy's access, and her admission to photographing our financial documents constituted clear evidence of systematic financial coercion. Victoria hired a criminal defense attorney, but her position was weak. The evidence spanning multiple jurisdictions and involving documented patterns of predatory behavior made plea negotiations her only realistic option. Her attorney contacted Dorothy within a week. Miss Garrison is willing to agree to permanent no-contact orders and restitution in exchange for reduced charges. What restitution? Dorothy asked. She's prepared to return all assets obtained through inheritance fraud to the previous victims' families. Victoria was facing felony charges in 3 states. Her career as a professional widow was over. Andrew filed for divorce that Friday. He was finally free to protect his son and rebuild his relationship with his father. Justice had been served systematically, legally, and completely. Victoria's legal consequences unfolded systematically over the following months. Connecticut State Police coordinated with authorities in Arizona, Nevada, and California to investigate her pattern of inheritance fraud across state lines. The plea agreement was comprehensive. Victoria forfeited $3.8 million to the families of her previous victims, David Hoffman's children, James Morrison's grandchildren, and Robert Caldwell's siblings. The restitution covered assets obtained through systematic elder abuse. This case establishes important legal precedent, Dorothy explained during our final court session. Victoria's pattern of targeting elderly men through their families qualifies as organized financial predation under federal RICO statutes. Victoria received 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service with elderly abuse prevention organizations, and permanent restraining orders preventing contact with any member of our family. Most importantly, the court ruling included forfeiture clauses that prevented Victoria from profiting from her story through media deals or book contracts. Her crimes couldn't become her next source of income. Adult Protective Services closed their investigation with a formal finding that I had been the victim of systematic elder abuse, but had protected myself through proper legal channels and documentation. The Connecticut Department of Social Services published a case study based on Victoria's methods, helping train social workers and law enforcement to identify similar predatory patterns. Jonathan Pierce updated Eleanor's trust with additional protective clauses based on lessons learned from Victoria's attempted manipulation. Future inheritance protections would be even stronger. Your wife's foresight saved not just your family, Pierce noted. This case is being used to protect elderly families across the country. The legal system had worked exactly as Eleanor had planned. Systematic documentation, proper legal representation, and patient evidence gathering had triumphed over manipulation and pressure. Victoria disappeared from Connecticut within a month of her sentencing. None of us sought to discover where she went. Andrew's healing process was gradual but genuine. The guilt he carried for bringing Victoria into our family required both time and counseling to overcome. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said during one of our evening walks around Eleanor's garden. "I should have seen what she was doing." "Andrew, Victoria is a professional. She's had years of practice manipulating vulnerable people." But the signs were there. The questions about money, the research into our finances, the way she treated Timothy more like an asset than a stepson. We worked together to rebuild Timothy's sense of security. The divorce proceedings were difficult for an 8-year-old to understand, but Andrew's steady presence and honest communication helped. "Is Mommy coming back?" Timothy asked one evening while we were planting new roses in Eleanor's memorial garden. "No, buddy. Mommy made some bad choices about how to treat families. Sometimes adults have to live separately when they can't learn to treat each other well." Timothy accepted this explanation with the resilience children often show. Within months he was sleeping better, drawing happier pictures, and asking fewer anxious questions about family stability. Andrew moved back into the house where he'd grown up, temporarily, until he could establish his own stable home for Timothy. Living together again helped heal the relationship damage Victoria had caused. "Eleanor would be proud of how you protected us," Andrew said one evening, holding his mother's wedding ring that would eventually be passed to Timothy. The trust distributions began immediately after Andrew's divorce was finalized. Annual income that allowed him to focus on rebuilding his life rather than worrying about financial survival. Father and son, working together to honor Eleanor's memory and protect Timothy's future. The family bonds Victoria had tried to destroy became stronger than before. Timothy's inheritance was now completely secure. Victoria's attempts to access the trust had failed completely, and additional legal protections ensured no future predators could threaten his financial security. The educational fund was immediately accessible. Timothy's private school tuition was covered through high school graduation. College, graduate school, and professional training would be fully funded regardless of economic changes or family circumstances. But more importantly, Timothy was learning the difference between wealth and wisdom. "Grandpa, why did Mommy want our money so much?" he asked one afternoon while we reviewed his college savings statements together. "Some people think money will solve all their problems, Timothy, but money is just a tool. What matters is how you use it." We established traditions around the inheritance that emphasized responsibility over privilege. Timothy would earn modest allowances through chores and good grades, learning the value of work even though his future was financially secure. Eleanor's jewelry collection was preserved for Timothy's future wife, whoever she might be. But first, Timothy would need to demonstrate the character and wisdom to choose a life partner who loved him for himself, not his inheritance. "When I grow up, will I be rich?" Timothy asked during one of our financial education sessions. "You'll be secure," I told him, using the same words I'd used with Andrew. Rich means having more money than you need. Secure means having enough money to make good choices. Timothy drew a new picture that week. Our family working in Eleanor's garden, with angel wings above us representing Eleanor's continued protection. The trust would grow for 17 more years before Timothy gained substantial access. By then, he would have the education, character, and wisdom to handle generational wealth responsibly. Eleanor's legacy was secure in the hands of someone who would honor it. 1 year after Eleanor's death, I visited her grave on a warm spring morning. The headstone was simple granite with her favorite inscription: "She prepared for everything, especially love." Eleanor's perfume bottle sat empty on her vanity, but her presence filled our house in more lasting ways. The trust documents in the fireproof safe, the memorial garden where Timothy learned about patience and growth, the family recipes Andrew was teaching Timothy to cook. Victoria's attempt to destroy our family had ultimately strengthened it. Andrew and Timothy lived with me now, creating the multi-generational household Eleanor had always envisioned. "Mom would laugh about this whole situation," Andrew said, joining me at Eleanor's grave with fresh flowers. "She always said the best defense against manipulation was preparation and patience." The headstone bore Eleanor's dates, 1959 to 2023, 64 years of life that had protected decades of future happiness for her grandson. "Dad, do you think we handled this right, the way we exposed Victoria?" "Your mother handled it right. We just followed her instructions." A light breeze carried the scent of roses from Eleanor's memorial garden. Timothy's laughter drifted from the playground where he was teaching neighborhood children the proper way to plant seeds. "She knew, didn't she? Before she died, she knew Victoria was planning something like this." "Eleanor understood people, Andrew. She saw Victoria's questions about money, her research into our finances, her careful cultivation of your relationship. Eleanor prepared for the worst-case scenario. The anniversary brought peace, not sadness. Eleanor's love had protected us across time and death. The inheritance was secure, the family was healing, and Timothy was growing up surrounded by people who loved him for himself. Eleanor's final gift was working exactly as she'd planned. I began volunteering with the Connecticut Elder Protection Alliance, sharing our story with other families facing similar manipulation. The warning signs were universal: sudden romantic relationships with significant age gaps, immediate interest in family finances, isolation tactics designed to separate elderly individuals from their support networks, and escalating demands for financial assistance. Victoria's methods are textbook elder abuse, I explained to support groups. The social media pressure, the family intervention setup, the threats involving grandchildren, these are systematic manipulation techniques. Families needed practical tools, documentation protocols, legal recording guidelines, and professional resources for investigation and protection. "Love doesn't always look like yes," I told one support group, echoing Eleanor's wisdom. "Sometimes protecting someone means disappointing them." The Elder Protection Alliance developed educational materials based on our case: warning signs brochures, legal resource guides, and step-by-step documentation protocols that other families could use to protect themselves. Dorothy continued providing legal consultations for families facing inheritance manipulation. Jonathan Pierce updated his estate planning practice to include specific anti-predator clauses and trust documents. Michael Torres expanded his investigative practice to focus exclusively on elder protection cases, helping families identify threats before financial damage occurred. Our experience became a template for systematic family protection. "Charles, your wife's preparation probably saved dozens of other families," Dorothy noted during one of our quarterly legal reviews. "The ripple effects extended beyond our immediate situation. Connecticut strengthened its elder abuse statutes, requiring more comprehensive reporting and providing additional resources for investigation and prosecution. Eleanor's strategic thinking had created a legacy of protection that extended far beyond our family. Individual wisdom converted to community safety through shared knowledge and systematic preparation. Timothy turned 9 on a sunny October morning, surrounded by friends, family, and the security Eleanor had built for him. His birthday party was held in Eleanor's memorial garden, now fully mature, with roses, vegetables, and fruit trees that would provide abundance for decades to come. "Grandpa, tell the story about how Grandma saved us," Timothy requested while we were cleaning up after his party. The story had become family legend. Eleanor's quiet investigation, her strategic preparation, her posthumous protection that defeated a professional predator. "Your grandmother taught us that love means thinking ahead, preparing for problems, and protecting the people who matter most." Timothy's college fund was growing steadily. His character development was proceeding even better. At 9, he was already showing signs of Eleanor's strategic thinking and Andrew's artistic creativity. "When I'm old enough to use Grandma's money, I want to help other kids whose families are in trouble," Timothy announced. Generational wisdom passing forward just as Eleanor had planned. Andrew had begun dating again, carefully with full background checks and gradual integration into family activities. He was learning to trust his instincts while maintaining healthy boundaries. The trust would continue growing for another 16 years. By the time Timothy reached 25, the inheritance would likely exceed $100 million. But more importantly, Timothy would have the character, education, and wisdom to handle that responsibility appropriately. Eleanor's greatest gift wasn't the money. It was the systematic protection that ensured the money would be used for love, growth, and generational security rather than manipulation, control, or predation. Our family's future was secure because Eleanor had prepared for everything, especially love.